Hello and welcome to another episode of Beyond Death. Today we are joined by a very exciting guest. I think you'll be very excited to know who we've got on our podcast today. She is well-renowned in the death space. She has done a myriad of projects, which we will be talking about today during today's podcast episode. And I am so delighted to present to you one of my favorite people I've spoken to, Angie McLahlan. Angie, welcome to Beyond Death. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, David. Thank you so much for such a wonderful welcome.
No worries. So we're very delighted to have you on our podcast today, Beyond Death, the podcast that aims to demystify things surrounding death and afterlife. And today in particular, we're going to be focusing on some of the amazing work that Angie has been involved in. So Angie, I know I've introduced you to our guest today, but tell us in your own words about what it is that you do.
Well, at the moment and for the last 11 years, I've been making and teaching with death dummies. It's a very niche occupation and it's a mixture of art and some of the situations that I've dealt with in body care over the last 33 years. And so I've been making dummies to help people ask the questions that they didn't think that they would be able to ask, to experience some of the situations, and literally to reach out to not only professional people, but volunteers who deal with death and dying, and just anybody who really wants to start asking questions, but to give them a situation that in some ways might be slightly confrontational, if that's one of the things that's necessary, but certainly thought-provoking and educational, experiential, hands-on, whatever the situation is, really. But I have a family of death dummies.
It's all very exciting, Angie. So the name Death Dummies, tell us how you came up with the name.
Well, the dummies themselves are registered now. Since 2022, they've been registered as the Ichabodies Death Dummies with their own trademark. Ichabod is the name of my first death dummy, and there's a long story attached as to why I chose that name for him. It is a biblical name, which means something like the soul has departed, but it actually refers to a very scary dummy that was in the wardrobe that we had at school for the collection of historical costumes that we had. And Ichabod used to frighten us if we came upon them when we were not expecting them. But Ichabod Smith was my first one, and all the Ichabodies that I've built since have Icha in their name. So the Ichabodies Death Dummies seem to be a very good way of describing them. They now exist as a thing.
Absolutely. No, it sounds like this is an amazing concept that you've thought about so far. So now we know about sort of the name and how the whole idea was accepted. Tell us about the reason. So behind every sort of project someone is involved in, there's often, the why. So why are you doing this? What are the things that are driving you to make this as successful as it is? Tell us, what is your why?
My why? Well, after I retired as an embalmer, I was talking to a colleague of mine one evening over, I think it was WhatsApp or Facebook or something. And she said, do you know anybody that could teach a hair and makeup course down at Green Fuse in Devon? Now, Green Fuse was one of the organisations that has trained very many contemporary and green funeral directors in this country. And so I just said to my colleague, well, there's so-and-so and so-and-so, and I named a few people. And she went quiet for a few minutes and said, well, couldn't you do it? And I thought, well, yes, I could. And that's how it started. And the first lesson that I did was it was a half-day course. If anybody knows me as a person, I don't really do hair and makeup. And obviously, if I'm looking after somebody, I will do the appropriate hair and makeup for them as necessary. And I usually ask for a photograph and their makeup bag or whatever. And if during my embalming career, if I'd rebuilt somebody after an accident, if I'd done facial reconstruction, obviously there's a degree of makeup that's necessary to make the parts of the face that you've constructed blend in with the face that the person had. So that's sort of makeup wise. But when I got to that first course, I was confronted with a room full of people who were would-be funeral directors. They all had some fantastic ideas about how they wanted to start their business. But it was very apparent, and it actually was apparent to me before I went. But what they really needed was some proper idea about what kind of practical experiences they might be expecting when they first started their businesses. Obviously looking after somebody after they've died can be fairly straightforward. I mean, we've all got bodies, so we're okay about knowing how to wash ourselves and that we can transfer that knowledge onto washing somebody else. But sometimes situations or illnesses or conditions can be quite complicated in the lead up to birth, to death. There's me, other end of life. They can be quite complicated, and sometimes specialist knowledge is required so that you can look after the person in a way that will help them not to deteriorate quite as much as they might. An understanding of basic disease etiology is quite important. Some basic anatomy, physiology, some understanding of how to remove drug lines, for example, how to care for somebody with a stoma bag, how to change that, or a catheter. Just very, very basic, slightly medicalized things, but just things that you might need, and how to notice that somebody is beginning to deteriorate, what to look for externally as signs on the body, how to understand death, the natural decay that happens, just things like that. And I spoke at length to the people who ran the courses, and they understandably didn't want to go down the line of opening a mortuary school. So they didn't want to ask their funeral directing clients whether students could look after Granny or whoever it was that had come to them for their funeral. And that was fine. But I thought, these students need this information. What can I do? So I thought about dummies. And so I started researching dummies. And I found some absolutely wonderful dummies that were available from the States. State-of-the-art mortuary dummies, but with a budget of, I think, probably about £5.50 at the time. I couldn't afford the many thousands of pounds that it costs to buy these specialist dummies, nor could I afford to get them from the USA to the UK. So I thought, well, I'll have to make one. So I then sort of got the classic back of the fag packet out, and I don't smoke at all, but you know the metaphor. And I started sketching wooden apertures to build this dummy on, because I wanted the dummy to be articulating, as near to body size and shape as I could. And I thought, well, that's fine, but it's far easier to just buy a plastic skeleton and build on that. So that's what I did. So Ichabod Smith himself was born in our back garden in the nice summer weather that we were having. And so I started training with Ichabod, who had a stoma bag, he had a Foley indwelling catheter, he had drug lines, I designed the body fluids and had a good selection of pee, pom, poo and purge that were safe for the students to deal with in basic PPE. And I produced an ethical dummy that wasn't related to anybody except me, who could open up conversations. He could be there and be cared for, be washed, dressed, prepared. The students could literally be led into the feeling of what it was like to be working in a mortuary surrounding. We could demonstrate all the care that we needed, and we could open up people's minds and ideas to questions, which obviously then led to questions about coffins and funerals and relationships. And that led to building Ichabod's wife, who I actually gifted to another funeral teacher. And I don't know whether Ichabel is in existence anymore, because I know that person's gone to New Zealand now. And then Icar, who I built to demonstrate some specific oral care things. And then their daughter, Monica, who had a daughter, Jessica, who is around about 3 or 4 year old. And then there's Nika, the baby, who's the only one of my dummies who I haven't made, but is a rebirth baby. So very, very naturalistic and actually quite interesting emotionally.
So you mentioned something about it being very naturalistic. Well, now I know, for example, that you talked about sort of smells, etc. Now tell us about that. How do you make it as natural as possible?
Well, obviously, many years of looking after people after they've died, you do get to experience all kinds of different odours and seepages and leakages and body fluids. So I started designing the actual pee and stoma poo and poo, and everything's designed in my kitchen, so it's kitchen friendly. I do a warning for nuts because I think one of the products that I use might have nuts in. But yes, I just it's a bit sort of Heath Robinson, mad scientist / artistic. But
best of both worlds.
So some of the two dummies that I've designed specifically for Anubix, one and of course they're designed to help people learn about postmortem imaging. And one of the dummies I was asked to build was a burnt person, so somebody who had been in a fire and their muscles had contracted to a position that might make it slightly difficult to get into the scanning aperture. And so I not only built that dummy, but I made the odours to go with it. So when the body bags open, the learners will get an experience of a body that doesn't smell the way that they might think that they might. Yeah. So it's just invention, really. It's a product. They're all a product of an overactive imagination, a set of artistic skills, and many years of mortuary work.
Which makes this even more exciting, I guess. So I guess then with the death dummies that you've been working on, like I said, I think this is astonishing. I think this is amazing work that you're doing. This is just a very personal opinion, but I think it's fantastic. How does a typical course go, or should I say, is there a typical sort of course that you run?
No, there really isn't a typical course. I've taught so many different people over the 11 years that I've been doing this. It started off with trainee funeral directors. I've worked with soul midwives, so people that work with people who have a terminal diagnosis, and they want somebody to sit with them and be with them at the time of their death and to just companion them through the change of state between life and death. So they're obviously not medically trained, but they do need to understand some of the things that they might be. I use the word confronted in a very purposeful way, because I think that in some cases can be really quite difficult. Pain is one thing to deal with, but odour is another. And I think that if you're sitting with somebody for hours and hours and hours, the nurses and doctors might come in just for a short period of time, just to make sure that the medication's correct and that maybe dressings have changed and things like that. But they will be coming in and out of the area. But as a sole midwife, you might be sitting with somebody for a long period of time, and you might need to know that in some circumstances the situation might be quite challenging, and it's very important, I think, for people working in any aspect of death and dying to be able to have conversations about the more challenging and more difficult aspects before dealing with the situation firsthand with a client or a patient. And it's very important for all of us, I think, to know what our challenges would be, know what our emotional and physical triggers are, and to really be able to explore our own coping strategies before being confronted with the actual work and working on behalf of a family or on behalf of a client. So that's one of the aspects of the work that I really think that my dummies and my experience and my approach enables people to work through, and it's probably different from the use of most training dummies that tend to be they're not built to decompose. I mean, I have actually discovered how to make a dummy decompose, and that was one of my little inventions. So the dummies that I built are not incredibly robust. They're definitely not electronic, and they do need to be treated sometimes with a little bit of care and attention. Whereas some training dummies are they're incredibly robust. They're made to last and last and last and go through the hands of very many students. So I don't know if that explains a bit, but the coping strategies of the people from whatever area that come to me are important. So there is absolutely no set lesson, because I tend to teach to the room. So I want to find out what the experiences of the people are. I want to know what their dreams and plans are for using the information that they might be learning. I want to know the areas in which they're going to be working. If they're sole midwives, they're going to be working in a completely different environment to if they're funeral directors. And if they're funeral directors, they might be green funeral directors, they might be traditional funeral directors. That there could be a completely different ethos and working atmosphere. And then, of course, if I'm working with volunteers or people who work in allied areas of death, like coroner's officers or registrars, cemetery and crematorium staff, they might not actually be doing body care at all, but they might want to explore some aspects of death that a dummy might be useful for. Yeah, no two lessons are the same.
No, absolutely. No, I think what you're doing is honestly fantastic. And I think you even mentioned it yourself about the whole, one of the reasons you do this is purely to educate people and also to prepare them, I think, as well, for what is essentially inevitable. Death, unfortunately, is inevitable. But I think it's very good that you're touching on the emotional and physical triggers for death. So I think this is fantastic work that you're doing. Now, I just wanted to touch upon, because I know that there is also a Facebook group. Now, tell us about this Facebook group.
Well, I started the Facebook group for some of my ex-students, really, just to show them what I'm sort of working on at the moment. And I've now got a stand for my mobile phone, but some of the previous videos from my workshop have been I call them the seasick videos, because I'm quite neurodiverse, and I tend to not be able to hold the camera and talk and think and and show what's happening at the same time. So
who can, Angie? Who can?
So there is a Facebook group, and I have some extraordinarily wonderful members on that group. It's called the Ichabodies Death Dummies, and people really do need to be involved in death and dying in some aspect. Really, it's not the kind of group that I would suggest members of the public join. And there are lots of body bags in my workshop, and some of the dummies that I've been building have they've died in quite extreme circumstances, and I wouldn't want anybody that was unprepared to be confronted or upset. So it's really a place for me to show my work and some of the artistry and some of the ideas that I have, but also for students and interested people to keep in touch, really.
Absolutely. And I think it's also about building sort of community as well with the people that you've met in the sort of death space, etc. So
absolutely.
I think you are doing, like I said, I know I keep repeating myself, I sound a bit like an echo chamber, but you really are doing some fantastic work. You really are. And I'm in awe of the things that you've already done. But now, what is, dare I say, what is next in the beautiful world of Angie McLahlan? What should people expect you to be doing next?
Well, I'm very excited with the work that I'm doing with Anubix at the moment. It's challenged me in ways that I haven't been challenged in previously. And so I'm looking forward to being able to unveil my Anubix specific bodies during the training that is going to be, I think the first training session is due to happen in October. So if anybody from the radiographer world would like to have a look at that, I'm sure you'll post some Anubix details for them to see that. As far as the postmortem imaging's concerned, my dummies are really only able to help with the external examination part, but I think that in itself is incredibly useful. And again, in the session that we had last, it really enabled people to ask questions and to sort of feel how practical procedures could be done. So I'm extremely excited about the postmortem imaging. I've got the possibility of joining in with some teaching next year, but I can't really talk about that yet because it's not my contract.
Watch this space, I guess.
Watch this space. We've been the go ahead has been given. The course needs to be written, and so the Ichabodies will be able to play a part in that later. So that hopefully will come. Really, I'm just available for anybody that wants to come and ask questions or talk, or wants me to come and speak to them. I've got 3 conferences coming up. I've got 2 in September. The first one's with the Institute of Cemetery and Crematorium Managers for their educational conference, and the second one's for a hospice. It's Wigan and Lee Hospice, and I'm going to be talking about. In fact, I've got the blurb here. The blurb being my PowerPoint presentation. It's about the intersectionality with some quite complex aspects of death and dying, and also gender and diversity, mostly diversity, but mostly the intersectionality of being marginalised not only by relationships but by smell. So it's one of my one of my complex coping strategy talks.
So there's so much that we can look out for, I guess, in the beautiful world of Angie, which we're all very excited about. I for one can say with a lot of confidence that I'm very excited and see what's coming up next for you. Now, Angie, one of the other sort of questions we tend to ask all our guests on our podcasts is, it's a simple question. The question is simply, what is a common misconception about what it is that you do?
I think a common misconception is that I would always approach a death in the same way. But I don't know, actually, being honest, I don't know if people would think that I would do anything in the same way.
Brilliant.
It all depends. And there are so many factors that need to be taken into consideration. But I mean, one of the things, I'm a priest as well. And if I wear a dog collar, I think often people have misconceptions as to what kind of a priest I am. So, I think that life is full of surprises. And I'm always open to learning. Every day's a school day.
Absolutely. As you say, you're absolutely spot on. I think that's just sort of the perfect tone for us to sort of end the podcast episode, because I think we've discussed quite a lot of interesting things today, specifically focused on the death dummies and the wonderful work that you're doing in educating people, in teaching them about the physical and emotional aspects of death. I think you are doing an amazing job. And I think people who want to know more can easily find out more on your LinkedIn, or they can search for you and find out a lot more about what it is that you do with Death Dummies. We're particularly excited for the things that you're doing with Anubix as well. And I'm very, very, very thrilled to hear about the teaching that's coming up in the future as well. So, Angie, it has been an absolute pleasure speaking to you today. You have taught me a lot. I found this very interesting. And like I said, I'm looking forward to what's coming next for you. So today, this may be the end of our discussion with Angie, but it's certainly not the end of the conversation surrounding what happens beyond death. Beyond death.